Welcome to the Bowden Blitz ACC edition. I'm Joe Lisi, joined by former National Coach of the Year, Terry Bowden. Coach, the regular season is finished. We know about the top 12 teams making the college football playoff. Only one ACC team made it. That was the Miami Hurricanes. Thoughts about the conference as a whole and what transpired on Sunday afternoon?
Well, and it was a roundabout way that Miami made it. Of course, when Duke upset Virginia in the conference championship, it caused real turmoil in the ACC. And I was thought for a minute there they may get no one in, but Miami jumped Notre Dame. They got into the playoff, and it's just a struggle right now. The ACC has everybody seems to have blemishes. Nobody had a great year. Miami clearly probably the best team in the conference, most deserving in the conference, but I don't believe there are two teams that are really deserving of being in the national playoffs this year right now.
Well, when you look at both teams, I think the argument for Notre Dame is that they were playing as hot as any team in the country.
Yeah.
They had won 10 straight games. They had dominated the ACC competition. Teams like Syracuse, teams like NC State down the stretch. They beat USC, a 9-3 football team. But we have continued to say that their combined body of work in those 10 wins, those combined teams only had an overall record of 54-65, which is a 453 winning percentage. And on the flip side, Miami had a similar schedule, but they knocked off Notre Dame. So I'm curious to know your thoughts. Does head-to-head matter more, even though it was week number one, or do you in fact believe maybe half the majority that believes you should take the best teams at the end of the regular season?
I don't think you can ignore the body of work, head-to-head competition. Both teams played better at the end of the season. I mean, Notre Dame obviously had a better, longer run at it, but Miami ended up very, very well too. And I think when they're that close together, you have to look at head-to-head competition, and you can't ignore the early part of the season. I mean, you got to recognize that Notre Dame won. They could have won those two games. And there are other issues, too. If Notre Dame was going to be in the ACC, go in the ACC, win the conference championship. You can't have your cake and eat it, too. And I just think right now, Miami played Notre Dame head-to-head. They both had similar records. Miami had a good finish, just like Notre Dame. And ultimately, you had to go back to head-to-head to pick a winner in this one, and Notre Dame lost out.
Absolutely, and Miami does face off in the first round of the playoffs against Texas A&M. We'll break down that game at least to start a little bit later in the show, but let's recap the weekend. It was an ACC championship that allowed Duke to get the victory. They pick it up in overtime. This was a very close matchup. Duke led most of the way. Chandler Morris and Virginia did score late in that matchup to send the game into overtime. They had their opportunities, but Duke pulls off the upset, Coach, which opens the door for Miami. Thoughts about what transpired in Charlotte Saturday night?
Well, Duke did just a great job of coming ready to play. They had two opening drives, one went for over 9 minutes, one over 8 minutes, controlled the ball, kept the ball out of Virginia's hands, and then they made big plays. They faked a punt on fourth down. They pulled them off sides on a 4th and 6. They got it down to a 4th and 2 and went for it. They took chances to make plays and won in overtime. So I think it was one of those situations, as you and I discussed, when you're playing 2 times in 1 year and you get beat the early time, if both teams are fairly close, I'm almost always going with the team that lost the first time. And Duke just did a better job. And, Menza, both quarterbacks did about the same statistically, but Menza made big plays when he had to.
Absolutely. And, if Duke was lobbying with Manny Diaz saying that the conference championship matters more than the body of work, and even though Miami was 10-2 overall, they didn't make the championship game. What does this say about the conference, though? Their conference champion was basically a 7-5 football team in the regular season. They steal the show and potentially one of the better teams at the start of the year and even at the end. Miami has to get an at-large bid. What does that mean for the ACC moving forward for next season?
Well, it's just down. I mean, right now I've got the Big 12 ranked higher than the ACC in my mind. The quality of the teams from top to bottom right now is the way I see it. And to me, the ACC, for it to be at its ultimate level, you've got to have FSU at the top of their game, Clemson at the top of their game, and Miami at the top of that game. We've only got one of those teams playing good football right now. Clemson's coming back, FSU a long way to go. And that's not the strong ACC that we've had in the past.
When you look at Notre Dame, and I know they're not part of the conference, but they do play a 6-game schedule with
Right.
ACC opponents, do you think that this basically will open the door, maybe long-term, that Notre Dame does in fact join a conference? There's now a stipulation in play for next year where if Notre Dame is within the top 12 and they expand the playoffs to potentially 14 or 16 teams, they're an automatic at-large bid as long as they're in the top 12. Thoughts about Notre Dame potentially joining the ACC in the next few seasons?
You know, I just get tired of the fact that Notre Dame believes they can go their own direction, that they don't need to play the same game everybody else is, that they can be independent because of who they are. I think they're living on that past reputation, and I think they should join a conference. I mean, the easy answer to this is if Notre Dame's going to play in the ACC, play for the championship. Go win it outright. Don't expect them to give you the games that you need, but not want to join their conference. Only in football, they're every other sport they're in. So I think it's time for Notre Dame to find a conference, get into that conference, and play the game like everybody else is, so that we can have a level playing field. It seems like to me again. Everybody's having to make exceptions for Notre Dame, and it's about time that they join the crowd.
And when you look at Miami, the way they're built, just big picture, is this in fact the best team in the conference, in your opinion, that Miami was deserving to potentially represent the ACC? Is this the complete team that potentially can make a run now at a national championship?
Well, I think they're the best team in the ACC. I mean, they got a 10-2 record. They've got the best football players. They have played the best at times. They've showed some weaknesses in their 2 losses. But I think when they realized how much they had about thrown away, they came back and played the way they can play. They are the best team in the conference. They have the best chance of moving through the playoffs in the conference, I believe, because of their talent level that they have on both sides of the football. But again, they've got a tough opponent in Texas A&M, and they got to play as they are getting better and better towards the end. They've got to keep that going. But I do believe they give the ACC their best chance of moving forward in the college football playoff.
Coach, I want to take a look at the hiring of James Franklin because over the weekend he said that and hired their former head coach Brent Pry, who was on his staff at Penn State. So they're going to be reunited in Blacksburg. Pry led this team to a 3-3 overall record. They weren't the best dominant defense in the conference. Your thoughts about Brent Pry joining James Franklin back in Blacksburg to coach up the defensive side of the ball from the Hokies?
It's a strange hire. It'd be a strange situation. Very seldom do you see a head coach who just got fired being retained by the new coach. And I don't think James Franklin has a big ego. He's not looking at something of I'm worried about how the loyalty will be. I just don't think it's as good a situation as you might think it looks like. But if he feels comfortable with it and they thought that'd be a good move, it's an unusual move. I think it's probably best that you bring in new people because I'm going to tell you, there's going to be a lot of hard feelings behind the scenes when something like that happens.
Absolutely. When Coach and I return, we'll talk about some other head coaches, what that means for their programs in 2026. We'll also start to break down the first matchup for the Miami Hurricanes up against one of the top defenses in the nation in Texas A&M. Coming right back right here on the Bowden Blitz. All right, back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi and Coach Bowden breaking down all things ACC. The only team to make it into the college football playoff from the conference was the Miami Hurricanes. We'll break down their game against Texas A&M a little bit later. I do want to continue to talk about coaches and programs in the conference. We'll start with Florida State and Mike Norvell. They get blown out in their final regular season game against Florida. They miss out on a bowl. Coach at 5-7 overall. Optimism in Tallahassee. I mean, he's on the hot seat definitely next season. Can this team, because Thomas Castellanos was not granted an extra year of eligibility, any thoughts about the program next year? And if Mike Norvell doesn't get the 9 wins, is he in fact out the door in Tallahassee?
Well, you know what? He's kind of got people focused on recruiting. I've watched them, seeing what's going on down there. It looks like every day they sign a super recruit. It begs the question, how are they getting super recruits? But it's quite often when you had a bad season, get your fans to focus on recruiting, focus on the future. I just would have to ask, if I'm an outstanding prospect with a bright future, why do I jump into that Florida State situation with Mike Norvell very possibly having one more year on his contract, things not going well? But that's a smart move. They've kind of got everybody kind of talking positive because they've got this recruit, that recruit coming in, and all these things going on that way. I guess in hopes that people will feel like there's going to be a brighter day next year. I just have a hard time wondering how they're getting the top athletes to choose Florida State when they've kept the same coach that have been through this situation.
Absolutely. We'll see exactly how it plays out in the offseason leading up to spring football in late March, early April. The other program that missed out on a bowl this year was Bill Belichick and the North Carolina Tar Heels. They had opportunities to potentially pull out 1 or 2 games, which would have made them bowl eligible, but they didn't seize the opportunity. Thoughts about Bill Belichick's first year in Chapel Hill, and does he have what it takes to get this program back to the pinnacle potentially in the conference?
Well, you know, I just have a hard time thinking that he's forgotten how to coach and build a program. I think he probably underestimated how difficult it was to take that program as quickly as he wanted to. He started to make real strides by midseason, but I thought they dropped off at the end. So they've got to really bear down and show us what they can do. Just because you're a great NFL coach, maybe the greatest of all time when it comes to the number of Super Bowls, still means it doesn't mean you can go into a college situation and just turn it around because of who you are. They've got a lot of work to do. It's going to start like just in the pros. It's going to start with getting the best football players and build with that.
When you think about the fact that he didn't win his rivalry game against Duke, he lost to NC State. These are teams that are in the state, right? He's got to recruit up against them. What does that mean big picture? I mean, that's obviously the easiest gauge to look at North Carolina and look at the program as a whole. If you can't beat the teams that you're recruiting up against, and obviously not unlimited resources like some of the other schools in the conference, they're up against it, right? And then he's an aging head coach, not like some of the younger guys. The offseason will either make or break whether North Carolina is successful next year.
Yeah, I mean, but if your first year, you're going to find a way to blame all the issues on the previous situation. And not that Mac Brown did a bad job, but I'm saying you're going to say they left us nothing, or we had a long way to go, or we had to rebuild from a very difficult spot. You're going to throw all those cards out there just to make sure that you can have a chance to get your own work done. So he's got a little bit more time than Mike Norvell in that situation. No one is happy with what they happened. They thought they were going to get a whole quick answer to all their problems. But now I do think he's got just to go out there in the offseason. And if you know what you're doing, go do it. If it's you know how to get that college program turned around, go do it.
How about Boston College? Because they end the year, Coach, 2-10. It looked like Bill O'Brien was potentially on the outs with the program, the organization, the board, and all of a sudden the victory over Syracuse seemed to change everything. And now he's got an extra year in Chestnut Hill. We know about the resources and the expectations. I think expectations aren't in Chestnut Hill to win an ACC championship. I mean, ultimately, but I still think they'd be happy at 9-3, 8-4 respectability. Can he bring them back to that type of situation or a year in 26 or 27?
Well, he's got to get it done. I think he's got to move them back into a bowl situation, into a winning record. They've given him the okay. Usually, when you don't make a move before the end of the season, you're waiting too late. You probably don't want to make that move right now. So he's got that extra year, and he's got to make sure he does a great job. There's just a opportunity in the portals with NILs to get you some key players. That's what he's going to have to do. They really struck out as the season went along, and they couldn't find a win towards the end.
And on the flip side, Dabo Swinney looked like he was potentially on his way to a sub-500 record. He finishes on a basic 4-game heater to lead this team to 7-5 overall. They have a bowl game on tap. Thoughts about how he might attack the portal next year, and can Clemson get back on top in the conference?
Yeah, I think really Dabo, of all the coaches, he says, you know what, I got to take a different approach. Doesn't mean he wholesale goes after nothing but portal transfers, but I think they have to sit down and say, you know what, we've built the best facilities in the conference. We've had great tradition, but we've got to go out there with money in hand, NILs in hand, and get the best talent that's out there. Kind of like Miami has been doing. I think he now recognizes that. He was humbled, I believe, this past season when he could find no answers early on, but as I thought he would do, he's pulled that team together. He's pulled up a pretty good season, and with a bowl win, could have 8 wins for the season. I think you'll see a totally different approach, not wholesale portal, but a whole different approach. That hey, we've got to get the very best players out of the portal, whatever it costs. We've got to get key players out of the portal.
He won 4 straight games, Coach, by an average margin of victory of 16 points per game. We'll be breaking down all the ACC bowls a little bit later in the month as we navigate closer and closer to the college football playoff. When we come back, we'll touch on Miami's game against top-ranked Texas A&M. Can the Hurricanes knock off the Aggies and Marcel Reed? We'll talk about it coming up in the next segment. All right, back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi and Coach Bowden breaking down the ACC, left off talking about the coaches and programs that disappointed potentially in 2025. Can they rebound next year in 2026? Let's talk about the Hurricanes and the Texas A&M Aggies. Dynamic matchup here, Coach. ACC versus the SEC. Texas A&M, for much of the regular season, was looked at as potentially one of the best teams in the country. They lost their last regular season game to their arch rival, Texas. They did fall to number 7 in the actual rankings. When you look at Texas A&M, they open as a 3.5-point favorite. Total is set at 51.5. Give me your thoughts early on about this matchup. Can the Hurricanes strike the upset?
Well, the big problem, Marcel Reed have a good game against Texas. He's got to get back to being the dynamic player that he has been with his legs, dual threat running and throwing, and not turning the ball over, because it's going to be a real question of which quarterback is going to handle the pressure. And then Carson Beck, who has had some tough games himself, is going to be facing a defense that's one of the best in the country, getting after the quarterback in sacks, great third down defense. How is he going to use his veteran experience to give them a good game? Should be a good football game. I just feel like Marcel Reed and Texas A&M is a little bit better right now. We'll talk about the odds a little bit later, but it's going to be up to the quarterbacks to lead as veterans. And Carson Beck is the oldest veteran in this game. He's got to have a good game as well as Marcel Reed needs to play a real good football game, a real clean football game.
Who do you give the edge in the coaching aspect to, Mario Cristobal or Mike Elko? Cristobal, obviously in big spots, technically hasn't stepped up. Now, he did win the last 4 games of the regular season to put his team in a position. But the biggest games on the schedule, yes, he beat Notre Dame and, beat some of the other teams up in the conference, but then he goes out on a Friday night and loses against Louisville, loses on the road against SMU. The one blemish for Texas A&M did come at the end of the regular season with the Texas Longhorns fighting for their playoff lives. So to me, I give the edge to Elko. I think he's a better game planner, better in-game manager. But give me your thoughts about the coaching perspective in this matchup.
Joe, I agree with you. I think Cristobal, he's had enough mistakes or miscues in decision making in game that it makes you wonder, can he react in the right way? And another big game, Elko, coordinator coming up through the ranks over the years, I think has done a better job of calling a good football game, making on the field adjustments throughout the season. Again, a team that was undefeated until their loss to Texas. So I think that the edge goes to Elko in his overall leadership throughout the year. Cristobal needs to go out there and not make a mistake or two in decision making during the game, which we've seen him make not just this year, but last year and this year.
And when you see Miami, I don't think from just a stadium perspective, Coach, they've played in an environment like Kyle Field, SEC environment, right? Talk to me about that aspect with the Hurricanes on their own. Now, Carson Beck, from a quarterback perspective, should be tested throughout his career, played in SEC championships, led the Georgia Bulldogs on a major run for 2.5 seasons. Never played on the road in Texas A&M, but give me the thoughts about the stadium perspective for the Hurricanes in this matchup.
That's a tough place to play. It's a great point, too. But I think that Carson Beck will have been in plenty of big stadiums and big games. But the problem comes with your offensive line. Can they keep from jumping off sides? Legal procedure, penalties, mistakes made because of the crowd noise. It's a very, very tough place to play. So I think there's not a question that's going to be an advantage for Texas A&M and Kyle Field because, again, there are not many places like it. There's the people never sit down. They never stop yelling. And it's an incredible atmosphere that has crowd noise and how that affects the offense for the opponent like Miami.
And Texas A&M, Coach, just one stat that we were amazed about was how good the Aggies were in third down situations, right? I guess the one game where they got somewhat exposed was the game against South Carolina with a mobile quarterback like Lenora Sellers. We saw Arch Manning rumble 35 yards in the last game of the regular season. That's something that Carson Beck doesn't bring to the table, right?
No, he does not threaten that way. He's a conventional drop back quarterback. He's got to dump the ball off to backside of the backfield, short edges, edge receivers, not on long passes. He can't give the dual threat. Definitely, he won't be able to cause problems with his legs.
We'll be breaking this game down a little bit later in the week for Coach Bowden. I'm Joe Lisi. We'll see you next time on the Bowden Blitz.